Today, our topic is an Eastern ballad by Allen Ginsberg. So, here is a picture of Allen Ginsberg. And Allen Ginsberg, you see, one of the most prominent writer of 20th century so far. Now, while analyzing this poem, you may have an idea that the poem, because its short length, the poem is only about 8 lines. Because of its short length, you may have this misconception that the poem is too simple to understand. But I can assure you that this poem is not that easy to understand. Now, before going into the detail, let us know certain facts and factors. Now, as you can assume that from Eastern Ballad, this is a ballad because there is this word called ballad. So you know, hopefully, certain characteristic features of a ballad, and hopefully we can understand that those features will be available in the poem. So let us see. Now, there is this poem, an Eastern Ballad. As you can see, the poem is published in his collection Collected Poems 1947 to 1980. So in this publication, in this collection of poems, this poem was also present. Now, let me read out these 8 lines a bit, and together with me you also have an idea about the lines. So let us either read together, or let me read and you just listen, or you just go through the lines. So the first stanza: I speak of love that comes to mind. The moon is faithful, although blind. She moves in thought, she cannot speak. Perfect care has made her bleak. Second stanza: I never dreamed the sea so deep, the earth so dark. So long my sleep, I have become another child. I wake to see the world go wild. So while reading, we can make this out that there is an end rhyme: mind blind, speak bleak, deep sleep, child wild. So there is an end rhyme, and the rhyme pattern goes as AB, again CD, or AB, BA, in that way. AB, 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 in that way. So the pattern is basically in AB, AB pattern, and it is about love. So before beginning the explanation of the poem, let us know further about Allen Ginsberg, the writer. So his full name is Erwin Allen Ginsberg, June 1926. So this is his date of year and date of birth, and he died on the April 5th, 1997. So was an American poet and writer. As a student at Columbia University in the 1940s, he began friendships with William S. Burroughs and Jack Kerouac, forming the core of the Beat generation. So up to this, you can understand that this is basically about American culture, American literature, America, about specifically Beat generation. Now, we need to understand what is Beat generation. So here is you have the information regarding Beat generation. The Beat generation was a literary movement started by a group of authors whose work explored and influenced American culture, as I was speaking about it, and politics in the post-war era. The bulk of their work was published and popularized throughout the 1950s. So in this paragraph, you can understand that this is about American culture, this is about the post-war era, the politics in the post-war era specifically. And in the second paragraph, you have the notions or characteristic features of Beat generation. Let us read. The central elements of Beat culture are the rejection of standard narrative values. So this is the first: rejection of standard narrative values, making a spiritual quest, the exploration of American and Eastern religions, the rejection of economic materialism, explicit portrayals of the human condition, experimentation with psychedelic drugs, and sexual liberation and exploration. These are the features. So in the writings of Beat generation, we can have these ideas: specific rejection of standard narrative values. So we have to remember this point: making a spiritual quest, the exploration of American and Eastern religions, and etc. So these are the specific features about beat generation. So in order to understand the poetry, in order to go deep into the meaning of the poetry, in order to understand the reading and the read between the lines, in order to read between the lines, we have to understand these features very significantly. Now next part we have to understand what is called a ballad. So a ballad is a poem that tells a story, usually but not always, in 4-line stanzas called quatrains. We have this idea because we have all read Shakespearean sonnets. The ballad form is enormously diverse, and poems in this form may have any one of the hundreds of different rhyme schemes and meters. So there are a lot of rhyme schemes and meters. Nearly every culture on earth produces ballads, often in the form of epic poems relating to the culture's mythology. However, the word ballad typically refers to the relatively short lyrical poems produced by European poets starting around the 13th century. Now, it is not necessarily short lyrical poems, rather it is a longer lyrical poems. So in the second paragraph, what is said, in popular music, the word ballad can also refer to a slow, romantic or sentimental song. However, this has no significant relationship to the literary definition. So this is the literary definition, and what is we find in the music, the meaning of the word ballad. So here you have to understand that this is a 4-line stanzas called quatrains, but not necessarily it has to be 4-line stanzas. Usually it happens in that way, and the ballad is a form is enormously diverse, and poems in this form may have any one of the hundreds of different rhymes and schemes and meters. So in a ballad you may have ABAB pattern, you may have ABBA pattern, you may have AAAA pattern, or something like that. So goes on and goes on. So this is about ballad. Why we need to understand about ballad? Because in Eastern ballad there is this word called ballad, and because it's a genre, ballad is a genre just like comedy, lyric, etc. Ballad also belongs to the part of a lyric. So we have to understand what is ballad. Now up to that we need to move to the explanatory parts of the poem. So if you have the copy, just keep it here, because it is not possible in the video to fix the poem or stanzas in front of you, because I have to explain through this. Now okay, it will not be a problem for you. Just go to your text and find it out. The first line, I speak of love that comes to mind, there is a colon. The second line, the moon is faithful although blind, semicolon. She moves in thought, she cannot speak, full stop. Perfect care has made her bleak, full stop again. Now in the first stanza, what we have, the poet is speaking of love. Moon is signified as a girl, and there is indeed a contradiction in nature. Nature means not the nature that the mother nature, but the nature of moon. How is this happening? Let us find out. So the poet is speaking of love. See the first line, I speak of love that comes to mind. So all of a sudden the poet is determined to speak about love. And because love is a necessary subject matter for a ballad, so it is evident and inevitable that the poet will speak about love and of love. So I speak of love that comes to mind. So the concept of love that suddenly comes into the mind of the poet, and he is determined to speak about it. Now what exactly is he speaking? The moon is faithful although blind. Okay, why moon? Whether moon is personified as a girl or not, that comes to the latter part. Why moon? Traditionally, moon is supposed to be the symbol of tender-hearted woman or tenderness, something that is not very harsh, very light, very beautiful, very romantic. So when it is about love, moon is a necessary part to expose that love after all. So moon is faithful, although blind. Now, moon, if the moon is faithful, but interestingly, she is blind. Why she? Because moon is tender, therefore a necessary association with female kind. So moon is faithful although blind. Because the moon is faithful, she is blind. So why she is blind? Maybe this is the night time. Now there are two reasons. First of all, why this is the night time, or why the poet is speaking in love, speaking about love in night. First of all, the moon is faithful. Moon is generally seen during night. Although blind, because the night time is associated with blindness because it is dark. But here moon is said to be blind. Alright, moon is blind, maybe there is a reason. And in the third line, the poet says, she moves in thought, she cannot speak. Now, just like every other girl falling in love just says or just acts in that way, when she is in love, she remains faithful and she remains blind towards the love. She moves in thought, she cannot speak. So certain ideas, certain thoughts that are embedded within the heart of the girl, but she cannot express it, because oftentimes it happens that the sensible thoughts of love can never be expressed in words. So that's exactly happened here. She moves in thought, she cannot speak. Now perfect care has made her bleak. Now all of a sudden again there is a contradiction. Perfect care has made her bleak. Now here bleak may be a passive word, maybe a negative word. Perfect care has made her bleak suggests that because we cherish moon as a beautiful object, because moon is associated with all those tender feelings and romantic ideas, and we tend to relate those ideas together because moon is a sensible idea. And in most of the poems, most of the literary pieces, we find moon as the beautiful explication and exposition of the lovers, of the romantic thoughts and romantic ideas. So perfect care, this is the perfect care, because moon is supposed to be always to be divine, to be so sober, to be so beautiful, and that is the perfect care. Has made her bleak suggests that because she was blind, because she cannot speak, so that creates a dullness, in the moon, and that is the reason why she is somehow pale, somehow bleak in her nature, in the appearance. Again there is another conception, because this is a contradiction. You see, you can understand this, that this contradiction is brought out because of the emphasis on the moon's character. So in one hand the moon is faithful, on the other hand she is blind. In one hand she moves in thought, on the other hand she cannot speak. In one hand she has the perfect care, on the other hand she is bleak. So this is the contradiction throughout, continuously going on in the first stanza, first 4 lines of the poem, of the ballad. So this is somehow the explanation goes, that this is not very clear. Why does the poet try to suggest such and such ideas? Why does the poet try to make an idea about moon in that way? Why does the poet give you extraordinary contradictions in the 4 lines? We have no clear conceptions about it. However, we can understand these are the factors behind it. Perhaps the moon is blind because moon may not understand its effect on things like sea, humans, or etc. Because in the next stanza, immediately we will get the effect on sea. So in the first stanza, therefore, we have seen, speaking of love, moon as a girl, and contradiction in nature, in the nature of moon. So the contradiction begins from the very beginning. The moon is faithful and blind. She moves in thought but cannot speak. She is in perfect care, but she is bleak. So these are the factors, and because the poet is speaking of love, so moon becomes a necessary part of the concept of love, because it is traditionally believed that moon is supposed to be the romantic object, or to be supposed to be the most beautiful object of nature. So moon has indeed its beauty, and the poet is speaking in the night time because he is speaking about moon and the connection of the moon to the love somehow explicit. Now, moving to the next stanza, second stanza, we have here change in setting, contradiction again, and an epiphany. Now, how are these factors coming into the second stanza? Let us find out again. Second stanza starts with I never dreamed the sea so deep. So you can understand this time the poet is speaking about the sea. The poet is not concentrated his focus on moon. Rather, he shifts onto another object, that is sea. So I never dreamed the sea so deep. Indeed, the sea is so deep, but we have no clear conception why did not the poet think or dream of the sea so deep. Perhaps it was his child. Indeed, a contradiction. So I never dreamed the sea so deep, the earth so dark, so long my sleep. Okay, so I never dreamed the sea so deep. This is typical line, very typical line. But the contradiction is here. The question is here that why the poet didn't think the sea to be so deep. Maybe there are possible reasons. Maybe one of the reasons is that he is not mature enough to think about it. The earth so dark. See here, the earth so dark, it suggests that the absence of the moon. Now, in the presence of the moon, the earth is not so dark. And it is very much specified at the beginning. The poet is talking about the night time. So, if the earth is so dark, it means there is no presence of the moon. So, this is the absence of the moon. Now, interestingly, the moon controls the sea. However, in the first stanza, it is paradoxical because the moon has no control over itself. The sea and its tidings are controlled by the moon. We all know about it. But in the second stanza, there is this absence of the moon. So the earth becomes so dark. So long my sleep, I have become another child. So it is a conversion. It is kind of a metamorphosis. So poet's observation of the sea and earth is so brilliant, so creative, that the poet tries to suggest perhaps that he is an immature person who wants to see the change, who wants to know things in a different way, who wants to get things in a better way, or in a better shape. So the earth so dark, so long my sleep, I have become another child. I wake to see the world go wild. I have become another child. Now, after the sleep, the poet wishes to be another child, another person, another child. See that? Another, not another human being, not another mature person, rather another child. Now, this is again interesting. Why it is interesting? Because poet wants to be a child. I have become another child, so he wants to be seen as a child. His mentality is not that mature enough. So his observation of the sea and earth critically relates him to be a child. And this is the shift. This is the epiphany. Because from the beginning he was not a child. Because not a child cannot speak of love all of a sudden. He starts with the poem, he starts with the line, I speak of love that comes to mind. If you want to be a child, if you are a child, you cannot suddenly speak of love, because this is a very critical and difficult concept to discuss. So this is the epiphany. At the end, there is a twist. The twist suggests that the poet wants to be a different person, but this person is not a mature person, rather he wants to be a child. I have become another child. I wake to see the world go wild. So this is the shift. He wants to see the world to go wild. Now, in the last two lines, there are two types of nature are connected. The changing of day into night and the changing from a child to another one are contingent upon time. So they are related, they are specifically attached. So there is this shift. So Ginsberg perhaps tries to point out the emotion of the moon and its very essence in the first stanza and its effect on the sea on the second stanza. But why does he want to change himself and wants to wake to the sea world, go wild? That is not very clear. Okay, there are possible solutions, possible results of this. Why did the speaker, why did the poet say this? We all have read Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, so there is a possibility of change. You see, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? If you remember the line that it is inevitable, change is very inevitable. If winter can come, so spring is not behind, not far. Spring is also coming. So this is how a hope to change, to recreate the world to be in a newer shape, in a newer form. The poets hope to see it in a newer way. That belongs to the idea of the poet. So the poet is here trying to create a newer kind of world, wants to see a newer kind of world where people's changed, where things have been changed. So he focuses two types of nature continuously: the moon cycle and the human nature. The moon cycle has an effect on the sea, on the day, on the night, on the solar system somehow, and the human nature. Now, this human nature is typically changing into a different idea. And how does this change happen here? The change happens in the wish. The poet has a wish fulfillment. He wished to change. He wishes to change, rather. He not wished, rather wishes to change into a newer world as a newer person. But this person has to be a child, because child has an enormous capacity of curiosity. The poet wants that curiosity back into his life, because it is the ultimate creativity that we are losing our curiosity. If we are becoming curious, then we are becoming creative. So our creativity somehow is linked to our curiosity. So if a child I will possess the same kind of curiosity, and because of the same kind of curiosity, I want to see the change. Because of the curiosity, I want, or rather I demand to change in the scenario. So there is a very much connection with the Ode to the West Wind, the poem that we have all know about, Shelley's poem written by Shelley. We can understand that shape, we can understand that epiphany, the contradiction, change in setting, etc. Now, once more, just go back to the first stanza and into the last line. The perfect care has made her bleak. This is interesting, as I have already noticed and I have already analyzed it, that why is it so interesting. Now, one more point I want to add. This line is a discontinuation. So see that there is a disconnection rather with humanity. At the very beginning, the moon was to be a child. Not child, sorry. She seems to be a girl. Now, when it becomes perfect care has made her bleak, that suggests that this is there is a disconnection with humanity, because human beings make the moon like that. So this is the perfect care. This is the result of the perfect care which makes the moon bleak. And here lies the creative idea of about the points of beat generation, that the central elements of beat culture are the rejection of standard narrative values. You see, this is not a standard narrative. In this narrative, we cannot understand what the poet wants to say very specifically and clearly. Making a spiritual quest. Maybe this is a spiritual quest. Maybe in the second stanza, the poet wants to search the spirituality in his life. The quest just begins by becoming a child. So the exploration of American Eastern religions is clear, because from the Eastern Ballad it is very specific that it is about the exploration of American and Eastern religions. Now, the rejection of economic materialism, because there is no kind of economic materialism, the materialistic view. There is nothing that we can associate with materialism. So there is typical rejection of materialistic view. And And here we have to admit that there is no such kind of experimentation with psychedelic drugs and sexual liberation and exploration. So this is not about sexual liberation or exploration. If we want to speak about the sexual liberation, then it is about the child or grown-up man. This is a kind of sexual liberation. I don't know what does this term signify. Maybe it is not associated, it is not connected with it directly. So here are the basic facts. So we want to understand this. There is the shift in tone. There is a naive and childlike tone that is illustrated in the last two sentences. This also illustrates hope that the speaker possesses. He wants to wake up one day and find that the world around him has changed. So just what I said about the lines. And finally, you have here, because the poem is very short. Now let me, before going into this detail, because there is another poem called A Western Ballad by Ginsberg. You can read that. You can also use it as a reference to your answer if you are writing about an Eastern ballad, any question regarding an Eastern ballad. So there is this poem, A Western Ballad. So in comparison with, just like Browning wrote, you see, the meeting at night and parting at day. So if a meeting at night is one poem, the parting at day is another one. So I am not talking about this one. You can have this poem, you can take lines for your example, you can use these lines if you wish. But let me tell you another interesting idea about this poem, an Eastern ballad. Because ballad is a very slow, sentimental song. You see, there is the breaking of the pattern. It is first of all very short, just 8 lines, and there is no sentimentality. Because if you want to be sentimental, then there must be emotion, outburst of emotion, and there is rather, I believe, logic. So logic creates that idea. Logic is giving that idea of creativity. If you want to be creative, then apply logic. In that two ways, perhaps Allen Ginsberg is trying to prove himself to be somehow creative. And into his creativity, an Eastern ballad fits perfectly well. So probably this is the explanation so far we can understand, and I am just sharing you with these thoughts. I have already done it. If you have any problems, then just ask me about it, either by commenting on the comment section or by directly asking me about this, that whether you have understood it or not. Maybe you have a lot more explanations about these lines. Maybe you can also explain the dominance of moon over earth from this point of view. You can also explain the symbolical figures, the symbolism here, the symbolism of love, the symbols of love, the symbols of moon, the symbols of earth, the symbols of child. These are the symbols. There is also illusion of a child. To be to become a grown-up man, first I have to be in the world. And again, there are rhetorical figures, for example, personification, which is very significant. So, and the rhyme pattern also points out that this is a ballad. So ballad is in its core, in its heart. The poem, although very short, is pithy and very succinct, I believe, because through 8 lines, Ginsberg is trying to give us an idea about ballad in a different way, and about the change of the world again in a different way. So here is the end of the discussion, and kindly remember, if you have problems, then ask me again.